What if the primary reason you haven't achieved your ultimate, like your overarching life goal, isn't a lack of effort
Right?
or, a lack of intelligence or resources, but simply a fundamental deficit in your failure rate?
Yeah, deficit and just messing up.
Exactly. Like, what if your current reality is entirely constrained by this invisible ceiling, and that ceiling is built entirely out of your own refusal to look foolish?
Which is such a common human trap,
It
honestly.
really is. So today we are not looking at a sprawling academic textbook.
No, thankfully.
Right. Or like a complex data set. The source material for this deep dive is actually a single solitary document with a pretty utilitarian title.
Yeah, it's called Ichthyotis textus,
Right. And for those of you who don't speak Lithuanian, that simply translates to pasted text.
which is incredibly literal.
Very literal. The document itself is entirely blank, save for 7 words pasted right into the center of the page.
Just 7 words.
Just 7 words. And those words belong to the late American explorer Norman Vaughan. The quote is simply this: "Dream big and dare to fail."
It's a remarkable shift in focus for us
It really is.
because we are so accustomed to synthesizing massive volumes of data, right?
Yeah.
But looking at a 7-word sentence requires us to use more of a psychological microscope.
Rather than a sociological telescope.
Exactly. We have to examine the atomic structure of the philosophy.
And the mission today is to put that atomic structure under immense pressure.
I need to see if it holds up.
Right. And we are looking at this exclusively through the lens of personal development. The goal isn't to treat this like some, hollow motivational platitude.
Like the kind you might find superimposed over a picture of a mountain in a corporate break room.
Yes, exactly. We want to avoid that entirely. We are going to dissect the underlying mechanisms of these words, translate their high-level philosophy into the mundane reality of, like, a Tuesday morning.
Which is where it actually matters.
Right. And ultimately, we're going to leave you with a highly specific, actionable exercise designed to alter your neurobiology.
To actually build the physical and mental muscle required to tolerate failure.
Because philosophy that remains in the abstract is ultimately useless.
Totally useless. The value of examining a concept like this is only realized when it fundamentally alters how you behave when you're confronted with risk.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the literal architecture of these 7 words.
Let's do it.
Because when you analyze the structural integrity of Norman Vaughan's quote, it becomes apparent that he isn't presenting one continuous, harmonious thought.
No, not at all.
He has basically engineered a collision between 2 mutually exclusive realities. The sentence is cleaved straight down the middle into 2 distinct, conflicting imperatives. On one side, we have dream big,
Right.
and on the other side, we have dare to fail.
And the linguistic tension there is deliberate and it's severe.
How
Well, let's isolate the first imperative, right? Dreaming. By its very definition, dreaming is a purely internal cognitive process.
It's all in your head.
Exactly. It occurs entirely within the insulated sanctuary of your own mind. Because it is unmoored from physics or economics or social dynamics, it is inherently boundless.
There are no rules.
None. But most importantly, it is insulated from consequence.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like, you can dream of launching a revolutionary tech startup, and within the parameters of that dream, you do not hemorrhage venture capital.
Right, you don't miss payroll.
And the market never rejects your prototype.
So it is essentially a friction-free environment.
It is entirely devoid of friction. But then we cross the threshold into the second imperative.
Failing.
Failing. Failing cannot occur in a vacuum. It is an inherently external phenomenon. It requires physical or social action within a chaotic, unpredictable reality.
You actually have to do something.
You have to do something, and it demands the exposure of your vulnerabilities. And unlike dreaming, failing carries tangible, often painful consequences.
Right, like you lose social capital.
You face public embarrassment, your financial resources are depleted. The structural genius of Vaughan's sentence rests entirely on the conjunction bridging these 2 states.
The word and.
The word and. That singular conjunction acts as a narrow bridge connecting the absolute safety of human imagination with the brutal, unforgiving danger of physical reality.
I want to think about the psychological weight of that bridge in the context of, like, an architectural blueprint.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So dreaming big is the architect sitting in a climate-controlled studio. They are sketching a magnificent, gravity-defying, 100-story skyscraper.
It's perfect on paper.
Exactly. The environment is pristine, the lines are immaculate, The structural integrity is flawless because gravity hasn't been applied to it yet.
Right, it's just a concept.
But you cannot live inside a theoretical sketch.
No, a sketch offers no shelter from the elements.
So to manifest the shelter, you must abandon the studio and walk across that bridge. Daring to fail is the moment you step onto the empty, muddy lot.
Where things get messy.
Really messy. It is the chaotic, hazardous process of actually plunging shovels into the dirt to dig the foundation.
Which never goes exactly as planned.
Never. You are inevitably going to strike a bedrock layer that the surveyor missed. An excavator is going to break down. A torrential downpour is going to transform your pristine site into a localized disaster zone.
The execution phase is fraught with continuous cascading failures.
Yeah. The underlying thesis here, however, is that you will never endure the misery of the mud pit to build a masterpiece without the gravity of that pristine sketch pulling you forward.
That makes perfect sense. The sketch provides the justification for the mud.
Right.
And the mud is the mechanism by which the sketch becomes real. A sketch without the mud is merely a delusion.
And the mud without a sketch is just a hole in the ground.
Exactly.
So I want you, the person listening to this right now, to conduct a rapid mental audit of your own default state.
Which side of the conjunction do you live on?
Yeah. Which side do you instinctively retreat toward? Are you the perpetual insulated dreamer? Do you possess volumes of notebooks filled with brilliant concepts for your career, profound visions for your interpersonal relationships, or expansive creative projects, yet your boots never seem to actually touch the mud?
The perpetual planner.
Yes. Or, conversely, are you operating without a blueprint? Are you constantly exerting energy, taking reckless risks, initiating projects, and failing rapidly, but lacking any cohesive, overarching vision for what you are attempting to construct?
Human psychology heavily predisposes us to favor one extreme to compensate for our deficiencies in the other.
Because holding both is hard.
It's incredibly hard. The tension of holding both the infinite dream and the brutal reality of failure simultaneously is cognitively exhausting.
So how does that relate to the scale of the dream?
Well, this dichotomy explains why the first half of the equation, the dream, must be engineered with intentional, almost uncomfortable scale.
Meaning it has to be big.
It has to be massive. If the dream lacks massive scope, the inherent pain of the failure is mathematically not worth the risk.
Oh, I see. If the blueprint only outlines a temporary storage shed, I am simply not going to endure months of freezing rain and broken machinery in the mud pit.
The reward doesn't justify the suffering.
Right. I need the promise of the skyscraper to make the bedrock tolerable. This forces us to rigorously define our terms, though. What does it actually mean to dream big in the strict context of personal development?
Because the word big carries a lot of cultural baggage.
It really does. It often paralyzes people before they even begin.
Culturally, we conflate big with statistical anomalies.
Like being a billionaire.
Exactly. We assume dreaming big mandates, a desire for global notoriety, achieving billionaire status, eradicating a systemic disease, or, considering Norman Vaughn's own historical context, driving a team of sled dogs across the barren expanse of Antarctica.
Right, which sounds exhausting.
Extremely exhausting.
Okay.
But in the daily reality of personal development, big is a strictly relative metric.
Relative to what?
It is measured entirely against your own personal baseline. Dreaming big means envisioning a paradigm shift in your own life that currently appears completely inaccessible.
So it's subjective.
Highly subjective.
Yeah.
It is an ambition that severely stretches the parameters of your current capabilities and self-concept.
So it isn't universally about ascending to the role of a Fortune 500 CEO.
Not at all.
Dreaming big could be the visceral vision of living entirely debt-free when your current reality is consumed by financial anxiety.
That is a massive dream for many people.
Right. Or dreaming big could be the ambition to deliver a flawless, deeply moving toast at a sibling's wedding without experiencing a debilitating panic attack when your current reality involves extreme social phobia.
It is the magnitude of the delta that matters.
The delta.
Yeah, the vast distance between your present state and the realized vision.
I get it.
The tragedy of adult psychology, though, is our learned proficiency in mitigating that delta. We become highly skilled architects of our own self-censorship.
The conditioning is so insidious. Like, when you ask a 5-year-old about their ambitions, they will confidently declare their intention to become a dinosaur or a space cowboy.
And the adults in the room applaud the imagination.
Yeah, they love it.
Yeah.
But when you are 35 and you declare your intention to write a novel, the immediate response from your peers is an interrogation regarding your publishing strategy, your market demographic, and how you intend to pay your mortgage during the drafting process.
Society aggressively conditions us to adopt frameworks like the SMART goal methodology.
Oh, SMART goals.
Yeah,
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
right. And while that framework is exceptionally useful for corporate project management and logistical execution, applying it to the overarching trajectory of a human life can be devastating.
Devastating, that's a strong word.
Let's isolate the A in SMART. Achievable.
Okay.
When you elevate achievability to the highest virtue of your ambitions, you systematically pre-compromise.
No.
You intentionally shrink the dimensions of your dream until it fits comfortably within the narrow confines of your existing competency.
And we do that to stay safe.
Exactly. You do this for one specific reason: to inoculate yourself against the emotional pain of potential disappointment.
But wait, let me push back on this framework a little.
Sure.
Isn't there a profound psychological danger in dreaming too big? Doesn't that become a recipe for chronic, inescapable dissatisfaction?
How do you mean?
Well, consider a hypothetical. Say I am 50 years old, I possess absolutely zero background in advanced mathematics, physics, or aviation. If I decide my uncompromising big dream is to become an astronaut and walk on the surface of Mars, aren't I just engineering my own misery?
Because you're likely to fail.
Yeah. By refusing to pre-compromise and set an achievable goal, I am guaranteeing a mathematically certain failure.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to fundamentally restructure our understanding of what a dream's utility actually is.
Okay, reframe it for me.
In the context of long-term personal growth, dreaming big is not about plotting a strictly literal destination. It is a mechanism for generating intense directional energy.
Correctional energies.
Right. A massive, borderline impossible dream functions as a compass, not a map.
A compass, not a map. Break down the mechanical difference between those two tools.
Well, a map dictates a highly specific linear route to a guaranteed destination. It shows you every topographical feature and every turn.
And if you stray off the path?
If you fail to reach the exact X marked on the map, the journey is categorized as a failure. You are lost.
Right.
But a compass operates in a completely different paradigm. It merely provides a heading. True north. You can march toward true north for your entire biological life, and you will never physically arrive at the magnetic pole.
Because it's a direction, not a destination.
Exactly. But the utility of the compass isn't arrival. The utility of the compass is that it ensures you are continually moving, exploring, and progressing in a deliberate, intentional direction rather than wandering aimlessly.
So taking that back to my 50-year-old astronaut hypothetical.
Right. If our 50-year-old hypothetically commits to the massive dream of becoming an astronaut, that ambition generates an immense reservoir of directional energy.
Because they have to change their life to even try.
To even begin pursuing it, they must alter their daily behavior. They might begin studying astrophysics late into the night. They might drastically overhaul their diet and begin conditioning their body to achieve peak physical performance. They might seek out communities of engineers and scientists.
So the literal realization of the Mars walk becomes irrelevant to the psychological utility of the pursuit.
Entirely irrelevant. Let's fast forward their timeline 5 years. They never receive a call from NASA. They never leave the atmosphere.
But they're a different person.
Exactly. Because they pursued that specific compass heading, they are now in the best physical shape of their life. They possess a robust understanding of orbital mechanics, and perhaps they have transitioned into a fulfilling career in aerospace communications or public science education.
Oh, that's fascinating.
The sheer gravitational pull of the massive dream dragged them infinitely further than a safe, mediocre, entirely achievable goal ever could have.
The dream is the engine. It is the raw fuel required for forward momentum.
Perfectly said.
But possessing an engine or holding a compass is utterly useless if you are paralyzed by the fear of tripping over a root on the forest floor.
Right, the execution phase.
You possess the perfect heading, but your legs are locked in place. The logic of the compass requires a profound, systematic paradigm shift in how we process the inevitable stumbling blocks.
Which means we must transition into the second architectural pillar of Vaughn's philosophy: dare to fail.
The specific vocabulary he chose is vital here.
It really is.
Because he did not say expect to fail. He did not advise us to tolerate failure or make peace with failure. He issues an active, aggressive command to the listener. You must dare to do it.
The verb dare carries a unique psychological weight. Daring implies the execution of a conscious, deliberate act of courage while staring directly at a known present threat.
A real threat.
Yes, if the threat does not exist, the concept of daring is void. You do not dare to eat a piece of toast because toast poses no threat to your survival.
Right.
You dare to jump out of a plane. By utilizing the word dare, Vaughan is validating the biological reality that failure is in fact a threat. It causes psychological pain. It induces fear.
He is not applying a veneer of toxic positivity over the concept of failing.
No, he is acknowledging the terror.
And understanding the mechanism of courage is paramount here, because courage is frequently misunderstood as the sudden absence of fear.
Which is a huge misconception.
Huge. If your heart rate isn't elevated and your palms aren't sweating, you aren't demonstrating courage. You are merely oblivious to the danger.
Exactly. Courage is the deliberate, calculated override of your biological threat detection system.
The manual override.
It is the conscious decision that the big dream, your true north compass heading, holds a higher existential value than the temporary, acute emotional bruising of getting it wrong.
The fear is still there, though.
The fear is still loudly transmitting alarms through your nervous system, but you manually flip the switch anyway because the ultimate trajectory demands it.
You know, this closely mirrors the optimal mindset required to master a highly difficult video game.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Consider games notorious for their punishing difficulty curves. You navigate your character into a new, unseen level. Your timing is slightly off, you miss a crucial jump, and your character falls into a pit of lava.
Game over.
You die. You have unequivocally failed the objective. But what is your psychological response? You don't power down the console, spiral into an existential crisis, declare yourself a fundamental fraud, and vow to never engage with digital media again.
Not at all. You immediately press the restart button without a second thought.
Because within the insulated environment of a video game, failure is completely decoupled from your core identity. It isn't an indictment of your character or your worth. It is merely data collection.
It's feedback.
Exactly. The system is providing immediate, neutral feedback. Your jump was 3 milliseconds too early. Adjust. You internalize the data, you memorize where the traps are located, you calibrate your timing, and you attempt the sequence again.
And you get a little bit further each time.
Right. So why does our psychology treat real-world failure as a permanent, indelible tattoo on our forehead, rather than a neutral, necessary mechanism for gathering data?
What's fascinating here is that the video game loop perfectly mimics the optimal neurological environment for human learning.
How so?
Iterative failure, followed by immediate recalibration, is how the brain masters complex tasks. In the real world, however, the ego intervenes.
Ah, the ego.
The ego operates as a hyper-vigilant defense mechanism. It interprets a failed business initiative, a rejected manuscript, or a poorly received presentation, not as a lack of mechanical skill, but as a severe threat to our social survival.
It feels like life or death.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yet in the strict context of personal development, actively avoiding that social failure mathematically guarantees stagnation.
If you refuse to risk the lava pit, your character remains permanently frozen at the starting line.
If you are not failing with some degree of regularity, it is a definitive diagnostic indicator that you are operating exclusively within your pre-established competency zone.
You're only doing what you already know you can do.
You are only executing tasks you have already mastered. Therefore, the absence of failure is not a sign of perfection. It is the ultimate failure of personal growth.
Wow.
It represents the quiet, comfortable atrophy of the big dream.
The underlying philosophy is incredibly compelling. The concept of the true north compass, the architectural sketch, the video game data collection, these are powerful mental models.
But models only hold value if they survive contact with reality.
Exactly. I want to yank this entire concept out of the theoretical ether and drop it onto a normal, mundane Tuesday afternoon.
Let's do it.
Because we aren't leading expeditions across the Antarctic ice shelf. We are attempting to navigate the complexities of our modern lives. Let's ground Norman Vaughan's quote in highly relatable, everyday scenarios.
We need to observe how the friction between the dream and the dare manifests in common environments.
Okay, let's begin with career advancement. This is a universally understood arena of anxiety.
Oh, definitely.
Imagine you are reviewing a professional job board. You discover a posting for a role that represents a massive evolutionary leap from your current position.
The dream job.
Right. The title carries significant authority, the compensation package would fundamentally alter your financial trajectory, and the scope of the work is deeply inspiring. However, As you scan the mandatory requirements, you realize your current resume only satisfies roughly 60% of their listed qualifications.
This is a classic inflection point where the ego attempts to intervene and enforce self-censorship to protect against the sting of professional rejection.
So how does the architecture of Ron's quote map directly onto this specific moment?
Well, dream big represents the internal cognitive vision. It is the act of permitting yourself to fully visualize thriving within that advanced capacity.
Putting yourself in that office.
It is the mental rehearsal of sitting in the executive office, architecting strategy for the team, and dissecting high-level problems. It is the intentional refusal to diminish your ambition simply because a gap exists between your current competency and their desired profile.
But the cognitive vision doesn't rate the cover letter.
No, the vision is static until it crosses the bridge. Dare to fail is the mechanical, physical execution of the action. It is attaching the resume, drafting the email, and clicking submit.
Which is terrifying.
Because by taking that action, you are intentionally courting the rejection. You are risking the discomfort of an interview panel exposing your knowledge gaps.
Yeah.
You have to actively dare to appear underqualified and risk the associated embarrassment in order to grant yourself the statistical possibility of ascending to the role.
That transition from static vision to mechanical risk is vital. Let's shift our focus from the professional sphere into interpersonal relationships.
Okay, a much messier domain.
Very messy. The stakes here often feel far more severe because the failure is deeply personal. Consider the process of initiating a profoundly vulnerable conversation.
Like what?
This could involve confronting a best friend to resolve a years-long quiet resentment, or it could be as fundamental as asking an acquaintance out on a romantic date.
The neurological threat level in these scenarios is massive because interpersonal connection is inextricably linked to our primal need for inclusion.
Right.
In this context, dream big is the conceptual desire for a deeply authentic, frictionless, entirely transparent relationship. It is the vision of a friendship entirely devoid of passive aggression, or a romantic partnership rooted in absolute mutual trust.
That is a massive, expansive psychological compass heading.
But traversing the distance to reach that frictionless state is terrifying.
Because the path to profound connection is paved with the potential for profound rejection.
Exactly. Dare to fail demands that you risk the absolute worst-case scenario to achieve the vision. To attain the frictionless friendship, you must initiate a confrontation that carries the very real risk of destroying the friendship entirely.
You have to risk losing them to keep them?
To secure the romantic partnership, you must verbally declare your interest and risk absorbing a flat, unambiguous no. You have to consciously dare to fail socially. You must willingly walk into the awkwardness and the emotional bruising.
And if you don't?
If you refuse to dare, you maintain a superficial peace, but you permanently sacrifice the big dream of true intimacy.
Let's examine one more domain, creative hobbies.
Oh, this is a fascinating area.
It is, because it involves an entirely different type of ego threat. Let's assume you are a fully formed adult. You are highly competent in your career, you manage your finances, you understand how to navigate the world.
You're an expert at your own life.
Right. But you suddenly decide you want to learn watercolor painting, or you want to write poetry, or you want to achieve fluency in conversational French.
Adult learning curves are notoriously brutal because adults possess a deep-seated intolerance for their own incompetence.
We hate being bad at things.
We are heavily addicted to the sensation of mastery.
So the dream big component is the desire for eloquent self-expression. It is wandering through a gallery and thinking, I want to manipulate pigment in a way that transfers my current emotional state into the mind of a stranger.
Or the desire to arrange words into a poem that genuinely moves someone to tears.
Right. And how does the dare manifest in the creative process?
Daring to fail means sitting alone at your kitchen table for a month, staring at your own objectively terrible output.
Which hurts.
It is surviving the agonizing cognitive dissonance of having highly refined taste, but possessing absolutely zero technical ability. Your watercolors look like murky puddles.
Your poetry reads like a melodramatic teenager's diary.
Your French pronunciation makes native speakers wince. You have to actively, deliberately dare to be atrocious.
Atrocious.
You must fully submit to the reality that you have to be embarrassingly bad at a skill before you earn the right to be competent.
And this is the precise juncture where the majority of adults abandon the pursuit, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
They encounter the acute failure of the ruined watercolor, their ego sustains a minor fracture, and they permanently relegate the paints to a cardboard box in the basement.
They protect their ego, but they kill the dream.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When you place all three of these mundane examples side by side, the ambitious job application, the vulnerable conversation, the terrible painting, the defining characteristic of the failure is never catastrophic.
No, it's not.
No one is sustaining physical injury. No one is facing financial ruin or exile. In almost every daily scenario we encounter, the worst-case consequence of failure is simply a bruised ego.
It is entirely an internal neurochemical sensation. It is a fleeting spike in cortisol.
The objective cost of the failure is astronomically lower than our primal hardware tricks us into believing.
So much lower.
We are operating with a brain wired to believe that social embarrassment equates to being expelled from the hunter-gatherer tribe, resulting in starvation on the tundra.
Which was true 10,000 years ago.
Right. But in modern reality, social rejection just means you didn't secure the marketing position and you resume eating your perfectly adequate lunch.
It is a fundamental evolutionary mismatch. We are running a highly complex, modern social software on ancient, survival-oriented hardware.
It's a glitch.
Our internal threat detection system is overcalibrated. It constantly misinterprets minor emotional discomfort as a lethal existential threat.
If our neurobiology is actively deceiving us into fearing inconsequential failures, how do we counteract that?
We can't just talk ourselves out of it.
Right. We cannot simply intellectualize our way out of a biological fear response. We need a highly practical mechanical method to override the hardware and practice the dare.
You are absolutely correct. You cannot think your way out of a physiological response. You must behave your way out of it.
Okay, so how do we behave our way out?
This introduces a critical shift in how we view bravery. Courage is not a static, inherited personality trait. It is not an immutable characteristic like your height or your eye color.
What is it then?
Courage is a biological muscle.
And like any biological muscle, it operates on the principle of adaptation.
Precisely. If you do not subject a muscle to stress, it atrophies. If you intentionally apply micro-tears through resistance training, the fibers rebuild stronger and denser.
So we have to work it out.
Yes. The fundamental error most people commit is assuming they must wait until they feel courageous before they take action.
Oh, they wait to feel ready.
They sit in a state of paralysis, waiting for the physiological fear to spontaneously evaporate. But the psychology of action operates in reverse.
In reverse.
You do not wait for the feeling of courage to manifest the action. You execute the action to synthesize the feeling of courage.
Okay, we need to prescribe the resistance training. Give us the dumbbell. What is the specific exercise to intentionally tear those muscle fibers?
We can call this exercise the 10% stretch, though it is also known in psychological circles as the micro-rejection challenge.
The micro-rejection challenge.
A fundamental objective here is to design a protocol for controlled exposure therapy, specifically targeting the ego.
Outline the mechanics of the protocol. How does the listener execute this?
The assignment is for you, the listener, to intentionally engineer one microscopic, entirely low-stakes scenario this week, where the statistical probability of failure or rejection is near certain.
You want us to try to fail.
You must actively manufacture a situation designed to elicit a no.
Give me the blueprints. What does a manufactured failure look like in the wild?
It must be profoundly mundane to isolate the emotional response.
Okay.
For instance, tomorrow morning, when you approach the counter to purchase your daily coffee, maintain eye contact with the barista and politely ask for a 10% discount.
Wait, what?
Do not offer a convoluted justification. Do not claim financial hardship. Simply ask, is it possible to get a 10% discount on this order today?
I have an immediate visceral reaction to that.
Notice that reaction.
The idea of doing that makes my stomach tie into knots. Why does the coffee discount induce more anxiety than public speaking?
Because you are intentionally breaking a minor social contract, and your autonomic nervous system is instantly sounding the alarm.
It feels so wrong.
Pay close attention to your physiology in that moment. You will likely experience a slight tremor, localized sweating, and an elevated heart rate.
Yeah, I'm feeling it just thinking about it.
That is your ancient hardware screaming that you are risking tribal exile over a minor financial transaction.
What if that's just too much for someone?
If that scenario is too abrasive, try an alternative. During your next routine, low-stakes team meeting at work, propose a slightly bizarre or unconventional idea that you are almost certain the team will dismiss.
Or?
Alternatively, compose a brief email to an author, a prominent academic, or a creator you admire, expressing your appreciation, fully expecting that their inbox filters will ensure you never receive a reply.
Let's clarify the victory condition here, though. Am I trying to successfully negotiate the discount? And am I trying to get my unconventional idea approved?
Emphatically no.
Okay.
If you receive the discount or your idea is adopted, the exercise was a failure because you did not experience the necessary resistance.
Wow.
The victory condition of this exercise is the successful acquisition of a no. The objective is to trigger the rejection, to feel the specific physiological flush of embarrassment, to endure the agonizing 2 seconds of awkward silence, and then to cognitively process the realization that your body did not spontaneously combust.
You complete the transaction, you pay full price for the coffee, you walk out of the door, and you realize the world has not ended.
You provide your nervous system with empirical, undeniable evidence that a minor social failure is not a fatal event. It is merely a transient, mildly uncomfortable sensation.
And that builds the muscle.
By administering these microdoses of rejection, you are progressively loading the courage muscle. You apply stress, the ego sustains a micro-tear, and it rebuilds with a slightly higher tolerance for discomfort.
It is systematic desensitization. It entirely demystifies the boogeyman of failure.
Exactly.
Well, I am committing to the protocol. I am going to execute the coffee shop discount request tomorrow morning.
Excellent.
I already know my voice will probably shake, but I am going to do it to gather the data. And I want you, wherever you are listening right now, to lock in your specific commitment. Select your 10% stretch. Choose the specific micro-rejection you are going to hunt down this week.
This raises an important question, which may be the critical fulcrum upon which this entire discussion rests.
What's that?
If you commit to this protocol, and you successfully recalibrate your nervous system through empirical evidence,
Right.
if you manage to systematically strip away the primal, paralyzing terror of social embarrassment, what is the remaining barrier preventing you from executing your massive, overarching dream?
Ooh. If the anticipation of the pain is removed, the cage is effectively unlocked.
You realize the door was never locked in the first place. You were just terrified of turning the handle.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out and view the entire landscape we've traversed today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We initiated this deep dive, staring at a completely blank page containing a single, isolated sentence from Oklihot's Textas, 7 words: dream big and dare to fail.
We analyzed the severe linguistic friction generated by the conjunction connecting the infinite safety of human imagination with the chaotic danger of physical reality.
And we established that dreaming big is not about plotting a guaranteed route to a billionaire's lifestyle. It is the act of establishing a true north compass heading that generates intense, transformative directional energy.
Regardless of whether you ever reach the literal destination.
Exactly. We redefine the architecture of failure, stripping away the ego's hypervigilant defense mechanisms and viewing it purely as neutral data collection.
Much like navigating a video game.
We acknowledge the stark reality that the active avoidance of failure is the only guaranteed mechanism for total stagnation.
And then we took those abstract concepts and dragged them into the mud of our daily existence.
Hitting submit on the underqualified job application, initiating the terrifying interpersonal conversation, and enduring the agonizing process of painting the terrible watercolor.
All of it.
And finally, we engineered a specific protocol, the 10% stretch, to actively hypertrophy the muscle of courage through intentional micro-rejections.
Because Norman Vaughn was not dispensing a hollow platitude.
He wasn't. He was providing a highly compressed, structurally sound, 2-step architectural blueprint for a fully realized human existence.
It is a blueprint that demands equal parts profound imagination to see what isn't there, and profound resilience to endure what is.
Which leaves us with one final, unresolved thought. I want to leave you with a concept to turn over in your mind, a slight reframing of everything we've built today.
Let's hear it.
We operate under the assumption that the realized dream is the ultimate prize, and the failure is simply the unfortunate, painful toll we are forced to pay to acquire it.
The necessary evil.
But consider the inverse. What if the ultimate value of dreaming big has absolutely nothing to do with achieving the dream at all?
Oh, that's interesting.
What if the dream's only true evolutionary purpose is to be so staggeringly beautiful, so magnetic, and so utterly compelling that it finally provides you with the justification necessary to step off the safe, sterile sidelines?
Allure.
Yes. What if the dream exists solely as a lure to drag you into the arena so that you can finally experience the glorious, messy, fundamentally transformative failures you were previously too terrified to confront?
I love that.
Perhaps the mud isn't the obstacle preventing you from reaching the destination. Perhaps the mud is the entire point.
The evolution of the self occurs entirely in the dirt, never in the sketch.
We began the session by aiming a microscope at a tiny seed of a quote, and we ended up mapping an entire forest hidden inside its DNA. Thank you for stepping into the mud with us today and taking this deep dive.